Hello, everyone. I wanted to begin by talking about a very nice account that I came across, something that solved something that had bothered me for quite a while, and that's to do with Pascal's wager, the famous, if I believe in God and there is no God, what do I lose? Not much. I live with some fairly reasonable people, perhaps less exciting than life might otherwise be, but if I believe there is no God, and you do believe it because you can't prove it, then I lose a lot. And that's been used in apologetics for years as a sort of argument for being a Christian, but it isn't an argument for being a Christian. Hitchens understood at one level, at least, that this didn't make sense. He used it to attack Christianity, saying, what a God is this to deal in that kind of way, etc., etc. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. But of course, Pascal was just about the brightest man, certainly of his own age, and he was the father of probability theory in many ways. Incredibly bright. But as far as faith was concerned, he was very, very committed. But he famously said, the heart has its reasons, which reason cannot know. And that's true. He knew that Christianity is a heart faith first. The head is certainly to be involved, and I'm very concerned with that aspect, but it will not be a Christian mind until the heart has been changed. So what Pascal was saying to Hitchens and the like is, you're not actually rational. Because if you were rational, you would follow that probabilistic argument and be a Christian. But you're not. But it's not because Christianity is irrational. It's because you don't want to be a Christian. He wants to push them into the square where they face the reality. We do make these choices. But let's not pretend we're rational all the while. We are not. We are creatures of emotion as well, and passion. And one of the reasons I keep coming back to in recent past, and this fits into it, that Jesus' command is to go and tell what we have felt, how we have been changed. No one is argued into the kingdom, in my view. They're argued into how they work out their own salvation with fear and trembling day by day. That's our job. All the epistles are about that. But I thought that was a brilliant exposition of Pascal's wager. I found it on a website by Glenn Scrivener with Speak Life in brackets, but he himself found it in a book by Graham Tomlin, who's an Anglican bishop, I believe, on Blaise Pascal, the man who made the modern world. I haven't yet got hands on it, but I will, and I will read it and no doubt talk to you about it sometime in the future. But use Pascal's wager to convince people that the reason they don't try praying, the reason they don't try to contact God, the reason they don't even give church a chance, is not because it's irrational. That's them rationalizing their behavior. It's because they don't want to. Because they see it has costs attached. And the problem with us as Christians is we're not very good at expressing the joy of the Lord in one way or another. And that used not to be a problem with the church. I mean, the opening of Peter's epistle always stops me in my tracks. I mean, he's writing to people he does not personally know, who've been thrown out of Rome and are refugees in other parts of the Roman Empire. Nero blamed them for the fire that he started. They've had some terrible experiences. I mean, literally having it, some of them will have had their parents, grandparents, or others dipped in pitch and nailed to a crucifix set alight to light up Nero's garden parties. I mean, talk about suffering. And then he has the temerity to write this: I know that you have a joy beyond words. He says, now you have various problems. He dismisses that as just various problems. Because in Peter's view, he says, I know that the joy beyond anything, is still with you. And that, of course, is the history of the early church. The way in which they preferred to die for Christ than deny him. And the fact that their deaths were often a spectacle in a way that the crowd didn't expect. Because just like Stephen, I think, stayed in Paul's mind for the rest of his life, he'd watched Stephen die, but Stephen could already see heaven and his master before the stones hit him, I think. There's a sense in which he didn't feel it. It was put into a perspective that didn't matter. And that phenomenon comes up again and again and again in the early church histories, which are worth reading for that reason alone. There are many others too. And then we have something to pray about. What is necessary for us to present to the world a more truthful account of what faith is about, and also its depth. A lovely line in the Psalms where the psalmist writes that, "In the morning I have your presence." What a wonderful thought. Yes, we hope for that. Maybe we read the Bible, maybe we pray, but often there's no subjectivity. But we should ask for it. I think that's perfectly valid. That's perfectly valid, and in various ways, I think it will be answered. Certainly, when your conversation is lifted to that level, various trials becomes a better description of, say, getting old, where every day something doesn't work quite as well as it used to. And if I met you and had met you before, I'd need some prompting to get your first name. That little bit of my recall system is really, it needs re-supervising in my view, but God's in charge, so I must take it as it is. Your name might come back 3 hours later or something like that. So if we meet, please be generous towards me. And this weekend I had plenty of opportunities, last weekend, plenty of opportunity for that sort of thing, because we began the weekend going to a quiet family and friends, 50th wedding anniversary. Friends we met in our second year in Canada in the 1980s. He's a retired lawyer. They're about 10 years younger than we are, but getting certainly the lady of the house is getting older, and so they had a quiet 50th anniversary with close friends and family, and we were included in that, much to our delight, and it was a lovely afternoon and lots of conversations. I had been in the homes of 2 of the children of the family in the last year or so, 18 months or so, and met their children. So it was lovely to meet them again, and the children from the other family, in fact, to meet them all. The oldest son I hadn't seen, well, for over 20 years, so that was really great. How do you describe such things? They are happy in a very solid sort of way. No harsh tones, no gossip, just people remembering and greeting one another again after a long stay. That is a huge phenomenon. And that whole fact, I don't know, there were between 50 and 100 people there. Of course, when last great-grandchild arrived last week, whom we were to see the next day, Christopher, he brought our tribe to 50. So far, praise the Lord, without divorce, which in the modern world is astonishing. And I think that the hospitality of Christian families is something we underestimate. We're not, as a family, we're not the best in the world at this by any means. Some people have a gift of hospitality that makes us look very meager by comparison. But it's an incredible thing that's given to us to have intact families because they have a common master. Many years ago, we had, for me anyway, a remarkable statement of that. we were living downtown in Ottawa at that point, and uh, across the road, literally from the church that we were attending. And my wife went across to the church on Saturday morning to do some paperwork for Sunday school, and my second daughter Kathy went with her. And Kathy was wandering around the church, and then she came back and said, "Mummy, there's a man sitting on the floor in the kitchen." Now, being Sally, she didn't immediately call the police, you know. No, she walked along to see who it was, talked to him. And he said, "Well, there was a window at the back, so I broke in last night to sleep here." And she talked to him some more and said, "What about breakfast?" He said, "I don't have any money." She said, "In that case, you better come with me and have some breakfast with us." So she brought the guy across the street to our house without any further questions. It was going to be some hours before I met him. It turned out that he was on parole from prison, outside his parole zone, and he'd been in prison for grievous bodily harm. But such things didn't appear in Sally's list of important things to do. Breakfast was more important. It ended up that he spent the weekend with us. And then on Monday morning, I said, "You've got to get back inside your parole area or you'll be in deep trouble." So we found an old sleeping bag, and I said, "I'll drive you out to the edge of town because you've got to hitchhike a few hundred miles to get back in your parole zone," and dropped him off on the 401, 417 outside Ottawa, going west. And he said, "Oh, I went round through your house when you were all out, and I found all the money, but I pushed it all down the side of a chair. You'll find it. I haven't taken anything." I've never been in a family before. I've never had meals like you have before, ever. Can you imagine that? That's denial of birthright, if ever there was. But it's not rare now, is it? I have never heard any more of him. I hope it was the beginning of a turn in the right direction. I mean, the odds are stacked against him, being merely in his 20s and already served time for grievous bodily harm. But hospitality matters. And you do entertain angels unawares, so to speak. One of the other lovely things that happens to me every now and again, I meet somebody at a conference, a young doctor usually, and they smile and say, "I gather we've met." And on one occasion, she laughed. She said, "I spent a week in your house once." That is the way it is. That's good. I have a friend in Vancouver who puts us to shame the way that she looks after people, and for years and years has simply had a coded entry to her house and has done a Bible study for medical students forever, uh, whether she's there or not. We followed her example, brilliant, and put a coded entry into our house primarily so that people could use it when we weren't there. Uh, Hospitality. Think about it, pray about it, find out where your gift is, look around for the people that you have interactions with who are lost and lonely, and see if you can make progress. So, after that wonderful time, which, by the way, included almost all the teenagers that were there coming to talk to Sally and myself, not in just casual politeness, but because they wanted to talk. And the young are desperately looking for serious people to talk to because life is serious. And the shallow approach that they currently have is not adequate. That's why Augustine College was started years ago, but we'll come back to that in a moment in the sense of literacy. But we've got really serious problems on our hand, and they have to be dealt with before students go to university. But that I'll get to in a minute. I want to get there via the question of literacy. There was a very nice paper in First Things for June, July this year, The Future of Reading, which uh, added fuel to a fire that was already burning for me. Um, I first became aware of just how serious the failure of a common narrative was a long while ago, 1987 to be precise. And the reading of Alan Bloom's Closing of the American Mind on the plane for our first trip to Africa. Uh, an astonishing book to read on the way. I didn't read the whole book. I scanned most of the latter parts of it. But the first chapter should be read by all parents, even though it was written all that time ago. I think he was the first person to nail what was happening to the university, which is not a university anymore. It doesn't have a unitary view of truth, your truth, my truth. Destructive relativism, not in this case moral, but epistemological. All four forms of relativism are now dominant. How can you teach when you don't have a standard of truth? It becomes propaganda very quickly. But Bloom's point was that we were not training the mind. So he, one of the greatest teacher of Greek philosophy and indeed other philosophy in the University of Chicago, said, I'm getting students now whom I can't teach. They don't, I'm not prepared to do remedial training, and that's what they actually need. One way round that was a way found by Leon Kass, who taught one course, at least in the University of Chicago. He taught two, but one of them had as a prerequisite you must be able to read Hebrew. If you tried to do it nowadays, there'd probably be a riot. But that course was fully signed up on day one, as was his course on courtship with his wife. We have to find ways to not allow the slowest to hold back the ones who are going to lead the way in the future. One way round, which I hope will happen, is that the university will be downsized. When I went to university, 3 or 4% of the population went to university. That made it, particularly if you weren't in a place where money rather than ability got you into university, it made university very, very stimulating because you got through a lot of material quickly. And you had time to think about it and talk and ask questions because the groups were not that big. Now that's changed. I mean, the first year is ethically suable, I think. The university authorities know perfectly well that something of at least 25% of the students in first year university will not get a degree. And if they do get one, it probably won't be worth anything. And they're taking their money and holding their nose. That's disgraceful. Sure, if they went down to what they can, the students they should be teaching, they wouldn't be able to spend all sorts of money on very dubious activities, like DEI departments, no less. Fortunately, disappearing rapidly now, and competence is rearing its beautiful head once more. Nobody wants a DEI doctor, do they? They want first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, the most competent doctor they can get to. And that's across the board. This whole business is now helping you find the best in your field. But of course, those are being manipulated too. We teach so-called evidence-based medicine, which is no such thing. True evidence-based medicine is only possible for those who can read the methods section of the paper at issue, and that's not very many. I could read the methods section of some papers because they were using a method I had invented along with Philip Hilton. And we knew very quickly that there were people who were washing their data before they published it because the method worked, but it was not as precise as we would wish it to be. And so you had to get the numbers right as to how many experiments you needed to do to have a reliable conclusion. And when I took it into pediatrics, it was really pushing the limit. But when you knew what you had to do, you could do it. Or you could find that you couldn't do some things. So you can be a real evidence-based doctor only about that area of medicine in which you are a genuine expert, because you'll tell people, well, the best papers are this, this, and this, and that particular treatment has some questions attached to it, and so on. So we teach evidence-based medicine, but it's not. And the Lancet, of course, doesn't even bother in many cases to send out its stuff to referees. They take their own judgment as worthwhile. The first paper I ever published was with the Lancet, and I didn't get any notification of receiving the paper, but 6 weeks later I got the preprint. That was the Lancet in those days, very efficient. That world has gone. So Bloom understood that we needed narratives to put in place some of the immaterial aspects of life which are essential to other aspects of life. Banking, for instance, we couldn't do it for ourselves in the Christian world for centuries. The Jews did it because they had learned a very important lesson. If you lend money or if you borrow money, you must keep your promises. You don't break your promises. That's the essence of banking. If you get to the point where the bank can break its promises, as it did in several near meltdowns in the past, and it's certainly good reason for not using a lot of banks now, then you're undermining the system, which actually made the development of wealth possible. I was very cynical about wealth production until I read Neil Ferguson's The Ascent of Money, and that changed my understanding of that. And going to Africa, of course, rubs it in. I mean, what Africans lack is any basis for credit. So how do you get off the bottom rung if you can't get any money to help you off the bottom rung? And of course, their countries are facing huge corruption because pagan ethics are the ethics of loyalty to your group. It works at a tribal level, but it doesn't work at a national level. To watch a village chief in Africa spend 2 days talking to everybody under the mango tree in the village while they sort out some problems, and he doesn't say anything for the first. Well, everybody has a say, and then he has to decide what the village is going to do, and it better be fair and just if he's going to go on being a chief. He was constrained by the fact that he lived with people every day. Sure, he took his benefits, just like the Lord told the children of Israel, if you get kings, they'll take the best land, the prettiest girls, the best cattle. That's what they do. That's part of the deal. But they have to write out the Torah so that they know how to make decisions. That set them apart. Amazingly, it's also why they became literate. We didn't get written language that was capable of anything approaching the Torah for a long while. I mean, the first written stuff, codes, if you like, pictograms and the like, were all about money and who bought what when, how much they owed, those kinds of things. It still happened many thousands of years ago. No animal has got there yet other than us. But it was pretty crude for a long while. It wasn't until the Greeks came up with an alphabetic basis that the possibility of real progress began. And my goodness, it has. I mean, you can read Aristotle's Ethics today and gain a lot from it. The Christian church, was too enamored of Aristotle for a long while. in my view anyway. They treated him almost as though he was godlike, but he wasn't. And certainly when it came to science, he was aware of how smart he was, but he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. And from his great mind, it was apparent that things fell in relation to their weight, which is only true about the difference between dropping a feather and dropping a stone. But if you put the feather immediately behind the stone, it will fall at the same rate. It's only its relationship to air that makes it go slower. But if you took a couple of stones, a bigger one and a smaller one, he could soon have found at the nearest cliff that he was wrong, but he never did it. And he never did inductive reasoning, which is, he knew about it, didn't trust it. That's perfectly rational. In order to believe that what you do as an experiment in Ottawa or New York or London should give the same answer, makes no sense at all to anybody who believes in evil spirits as one of the prime movers in their lives. If they have the power that a pagan culture, I'm not using that pejoratively, I'm not judging them, that's just descriptive. They look at the book of nature and presume it's designed, in most cases, that somewhere way, way off there's a great maker of these things, but he's not interested in us. That's the way it worked. So, you have no reason for thinking even an experiment done in the next hut will give the same result. And not surprisingly, you think spirits are due for disease because when there's a measles epidemic and children die, but others don't. Why? What's the difference? Why did that one survive and not that one? Now we're more sophisticated, we give answers to those questions. But don't laugh at evil spirits as a way of understanding the world. It makes sense of the world, which is what your narrative should do. Whereas telling young people they can be whatever they want to be, that does not make sense of the world. It is plainly false. You have to find what you're made for, but that's teleology. We got rid of that at the beginning of the scientific period because it can't be measured. We have tried basically since the 14th century to live as though the only facts that matter are ones that can be measured. And that is clearly, it's clearly rubbish to begin with. One of the facts that matters to you most is that your spouse and you have made promises that you intend to keep. Not that you feel, but that you've promised and you intend to keep those promises. You can't measure that. But you can know it within a good marriage. And then you have to negotiate all the things that come along with marriage and with life. And listen, don't tell your children they can do whatever they want to do. They have to find out what they're made for, which is quite different. But they can find the answer to that question. The girls are, in particular, difficult in my view with screens, and they're told everybody can be as beautiful as they want to be, and so they're playing terrible games leading to terrible outcomes and undermining the whole culture at the same time. So literacy is a two-edged sword. Now, one of the things I had thought about until now is that the extent to which we are literate is very, very variable. And in fact, most societies throughout the whole history of the world, only about 10% of the population would be truly literate.